Hi, and welcome to the garden again. And today I'm going to start it's going to be a 3 or 4 part series. It kind of depends on how long all this takes. And I'm going to time it. I'm going to do a grid. I'm going to build a grid, and it's for a lady named Alma. And this is the card she pulled, Compassion. And I realize all computer screens make color differently, but this card, if you look at it in real life, the center's a rather dark blue with a white accent on it. Then it's the things around it are green and green blue. That's the colors that are on it. And the frequency of compassion supports the ability to stand by others without judgment and to be the divine mediator between heaven and earth, spirit and matter, so that unconditional love can flow from the source through our hearts and into the world. And that's a really good card for her because she actually happens to be a graphic designer who does fashion things and make things, forms things from into our world to make things clearer for us by just images. She's a really nice lady. And this is kind of continuation from last night. If you remember, last night I talked about chakra crystals and which matches what. And remember, we had red, orange, yellow, blue, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And if you look at this card, it has the blue, which is for communication, truth, and it has the green for art, emotions, growth, and new beginnings. It also has some orange or yellow, which is energy and creativity, happiness, and prosperity. And there's sort of a little more flash of orange red, which is passion and a vitality. So it's got kind of a lot of the different colors that we look at in sacred geometry and in the chakra colors and how to blend the two together. Now, I'm going to show you some people say, how do you decide what forms to use when you're looking at a grid? Well, I can tell you right now, if you look at this, its form is 6. There's 6 main globes of blue-green color around it. There's 6 bright spots at the outside. And for the most part, in most grids, there's always one that is the center. And I always kind of like to try and start with the center, but I need to start with what shape I'm going to build it on. And I build on pie plates, which I know sounds weird, but the deal is, this is my nice clear pie plate. What happens is, when I have the pie plate there, I can put the grid form, and this is the seed of life. I can put that grid form. Here's another seed of life, and it would work for this one because it's got 6 petals, 6 parts. You see, it looks like a little daisy there in the middle. Then there's the flower of life, which is a more extensive breaking of shapes and forms, and you can do a little bit more with it if you have other shapes you want to put in there. Then they have one that's got 12 points, and those are for the 12 months of the year. If you get a grid that does do 12, remember 12 reduces to 3, so it's a grid that's about creating a strong basic change. And then there's this grid form, which is a 3-dimensional creation of, it's a 2-dimensional creation of the 3-dimensional Metatron's cube, which if you go back and look at my Platonic shapes, Metatron's cube was in there. And it's actually 2 pyramids intersecting each other. But this particular grid form is used a lot in protection grids. People, when they want to make a protection grid, or if I run into a sacred geometry card that's about protection, you'll find more Metatronic cubic looking shapes. This is called the torus. And I use this under my pie plate a lot because it's got lines, it's got ways that I can count for the intersection. But what it actually is, if you can see it in a 3-dimensional form, it's actually all of those forms sort of folding in on each other like a big donut. And this is the donut hole, if you can see it in a 3-dimensional shape. In a 2-dimensional, this is a donut hole. I'm sorry, I'm crappy at putting things on the screen. But this is a shape I use a lot when I'm forming things. Then as I've tripped through looking for grid patterns to use that are interesting, I found some more elaborate ones where people take those basic shapes and make it work. This is a great one if you have an 8-sided grid that you're, 8-sided informational thing you're working with. 8 sides would be money and power. And then this I used in the back of Tantric Journey because it looked like the images in Tantric Journey, and I found that grid form. Where do you find your forms? Well, you can buy them. You can go online and buy a book of forms. You can just go online and look around for a form. And you can search it out that way. When I started doing this 3 years ago, you could kind of just go out and people said, here's a form. It was on Google Docs and it was not, no one had a price on it. Now most of them are, they say they're copyrighted, but those things came off ancient temples. So I don't know how copyrighted they really are. But, you know, you have to do what you have to do. There are things that do that, and take care of that. Now, the other thing is, once I've got my shape that I'm going to work with, I'm going to work with for this one. You'd think I'd be more organized, but you've learned I'm not. This is why it's going to be a 4-part series, guys. This is what I'm going to be working with, okay? The torus shape. It's T-O-R-U-S, torus shape. And the torus shape, now I have to decide what am I going to put in the middle. And you have to kind of look at the basic form we have here, the communication, and it's got that bluish, purplish thing in the middle. And I have a couple of different choices of options. Now, there are all kinds of crystal shapes in the world. There's a pyramid, and the pyramid takes energy fields. It's used for healing, meditation. It directs energy in and out of a double helix, so that would work for this form. I could look for a sphere, and spheres mean wholeness. And a real sphere would be like this little tiger's eye, but real spheres roll. So I tend to use cabochons to represent a sphere. Now, I would prefer to have a dark blue sphere or a dark sphere because, as you noted, this had bluish reddish center and then a white top. So this is a bluish reddish center, and I don't have a white top because I'm going to the rock shop tomorrow to finish this out. But I have this, which is a lovely little piece of rose quartz. So it looks light. So I can kind of get a feel, does that look like what I think the center of the grid should look like? So that's if I go with it round. Now, what other shapes can we put in the middle of our grid? And we can put an obelisk. This is a selenite sort of obelisk form. I put that in the middle of grids. Wouldn't work in this grid. It's a little bit too big. But an obelisk connects the physical and the spiritual planes. So if you do choose to put an obelisk in the middle of your grid, that's what you're doing energetically. If your grid happens to be about a little critter or an animal, if you find stones, and you find them a lot in the rock shop that are cut up to, or carved up to be animals, that connects to the animals or your pet animal guides. The Merkaba, which is the shape I talked to you about, that's sort of Metatron's cubes. It's the double pyramid. I don't know how you would even get one in the middle of this, but if you were, that's vision and connections to all realms. If you were to put an angel, in the middle of a grid, if that fit the spirit of that grid, then it would have to do with higher vision. A wizard manifests actions and powers over the elements. A heart, which I do have a lot of little hearts floating around here somewhere. Oh, okay. But they're all big. They're all too big to go into the center of the grid. But I'll show you. Andrea's favorite heart, my Jasper Bumblebee. If you put a heart in the middle of the grid like that, or like that, depending on your perspective on this, that's love, emotions, relationships between the elements. Eggs are like little egg-shaped ones, and they're the beginning, birth, and creation. A cube is space-time, a solid building block for reality. And a cube that I've used frequently is fool's gold. Pyrite forms, if it's in its purest form, its molecules form into a perfect little cube. And that's good for that because space-time building blocks in reality are part of what gold's about. Clusters of stones. If you had this little guy, and you want to put him in the middle, he looks like that when he's on the side, but it looks like a little building. I like it because it sort of looks like a little cityscape. Clusters, the crystal's highest vibration, sending energy out in every direction. That's a cluster. This is also a cluster where you can see the stones are pointing out in all different sorts of directions. And that means the energy they're bringing in and out of the grid is from all different directions. A double terminated, and I don't happen to have one just sitting here looking at me, but double terminated, meaning a point on each end for a crystal, directs flowing energy from one thing to another. Now, if you were to do a grid where you had two power points that you really wanted to connect, say conscious and subconscious, or energy and where you want to direct the energy, you put a double terminated and it would bounce the energy back and forth between those two. A geode, now I have a beautiful geode, but I have a beautiful geode, which is like way too big to go in a grid, but it's an amethyst geode. It's gorgeous. And you can see geodes, they're a slower, more stable release of energy. They're taking it in, it's going through that mass and then going out. And you can find little bitty geodes that would work for going in the center of the grid. Tumbled stones, got lots and lots and lots of tumbled stones. And tumbled stones, I use them sometimes in the middle of a grid. As a matter of fact, I'm holding on to these to put in the middle of one. And they slowly diffuse the energy in all directions. And they're very powerful when you're using them in grids. And when you set them out and move them around, and you'll see that later on in this grid, because we're going to discuss color, and then which tumbled stones I want to use the color for. But they diffuse the energy and they make a much more powerful connection in the grid. And then harmonizers are two cylinders that can be, I don't know what a harmonizer is, that their definition of that makes no sense to me. So I think because of how I view this grid is going to be built out in a circle, my two choices are going to be therefore a pyramid, and that this is to the edge of an 8-inch frame, this point. So a pyramid or going for wholeness, a pyramid, which is energy fields, healing, meditation, directs energy in a double helix, or wholeness, completion, diffuses energy in all directions. And I would emphasize it with a lighter crystal on top. Sometimes I've been known to not put round crystals on one of these cabochons. I've been known to put them together with a tiny little piece of ice calcite or some other very linear stone. So that's where I am at this point in time. My next great decision is going to be, what color do I feel it's kind of between a blue and a green, and I have to figure out which of the stones I have available. So I have some very blue stones. These are blue adventurine, and blue adventurine brings a lot of luck. Blue adventurine means luck with communications and emotional situations. I have some green adventurine, and they're considerably larger, but they're, oh, you can't see them, I'm sorry. These are the blue adventurines. These are the green adventurines that I have a choice about. I also have, oh, and these are cool. I'm going to put a little, one of each of these out on the tray so you kind of see it. I'm going to try to find the darkest greens I can in the green adventurine. And green adventurines, it's been called a gambler's stone. It's a good luck stone, if you're interested in that. This is the blue adventurine, and some of it's quite a bit darker. This is darker. And I tumble a bunch out of the bag and look at them and decide what I want to do. And then these I love, and it's a stone I just recently found. It's not as nice and as roundy, but it's tumbled, and it's called crocodile jasper. And crocodile jasper is really good for, and I'm going to, let's see. I'm going to look it up for you. Let's see. It has a perfect meaning for this. It calms the mind and promotes a feeling of peace. And when you're looking for someone with compassion, you would look for that. That's why I felt like it was a good stone for this. But what I'd have to do is take the blue adventurine and the green adventurine off. Take the card out of here. What I would do is dump them all out of the pie plate, and then pick through and find the ones I felt did the best job of balancing. And I need 6 stones to be around the very center. If I were to use the blue sodalite pyramid and put these around them, these are kind of a greenish blue, and actually on camera they show better than when they show in real life, because they have these mottled patterns on them, which is why they're called crocodile. Anyway, this is not the ones I would probably end up picking, but it would be a place to start to understand. Now you see why I work with a pipeline. I can gather the crystals up pretty easily. And this was an interesting bag of stones, because I got some like this, and I actually have another grid coming up that needs little slivers of color coming out from the center, and they would fit quite nicely into that pattern. So you're always looking, when I'm building grids, I'm always building more grids afterwards. So I'm always looking at what unusual stones I have to work with to balance and to use in other grids. And but I set those out there, the crocodiles, and you can see how it's kind of easier when you have that little grid thing underneath. When I lay these out finally on a board to frame, there may not be a print of the grid there. What happens is, after I lay out a grid, I take a picture of it and I hold on to that picture to figure out what I'm going to do. But say this was the 6 I picked. Kind of weird, but then I would look at because if you look, there's larger elements of color beyond the center ring. I would probably go to my large green adventurine, and green adventurine is perfect for this compassion, for letting you go with the roll and surprising. So that's what I wanted to do. And I really think ultimately this one I'm going to put a circular one in the middle for wholeness with a white emphasis on the top because it'll bring more color out. That's kind of where I'm going to leave it today. We've got the first two layers, and we're using a blue-green, blue for communication, green for emotions, growth, and new beginnings, and either a red or a purple. Like I said, I'm going to the rock shop. I'm going to bring you back cabochon that I think works better, so you get to see that. And that's how I work with, that's how I begin laying out a crystal grid. There's a lot of other elements that are going to be involved in this crystal grid. If you look at it closely, it's got emphasis of bright blue crystals on the edge and some things that shoot out. Well, I can't paint on top of the rocks. What I can do is find tiny little quartz points and flare the color out, flare the light out. And that's another way of connecting the energy of the grid together. And I've got to go find the very, very bright little white light dots that go on this one. And maybe I'll think of a whole new way of looking at it tomorrow. And we'll get to go through, because I never lay a grid out and just say, oh, that's it. That's completely what I want. I try a lot of different elements, and I have a lot of different crystals over here. And I know all you people are sitting there that have seen my earlier shows going, didn't she talk about crystal chaos, keeping all those crystals together? And trust me, the energy over here is like, wah, 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 wah. They're all going back, and I have all my crystals stored in drawers that look like the rainbow. So the blue stuff goes in the blue drawer, the green stuff goes in the green drawer. And that's kind of how I separate them and keep them all calm and quiet. But it's a start. It's not a finish. We're not done yet. Once again, I'll go over some of this stuff again tomorrow night. If you didn't catch it tonight, bring your pen and paper so that you can see what we got going. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. And when we'll be maybe playing with some other combinations on this part of the grid, but I will definitely be changing up the center stone because I just don't have a center stone that I'm really excited about right now. And like I said, I'm going to the rock shop tomorrow because I also figured out I'm really shy on bright yellow, and I have two very exciting grids I'm putting together that have bright yellow. But anyway, that's Alma's grid, and I look forward to following this all the way to its completion. And I hope this didn't last too long, but it's part one of Alma's grid. You have a good evening. Bye-bye.